The world has changed since the 24th of February, and NATO has now got to be ready for one or two generations of tension with Russia, and that we've got to show to the Russians that we're not going to play about with sophisticated deterrence tripwire concepts. We're simply going to defend ourselves, and that they, the Russians or Putin, has got to get that message. I think that's what this is really all about.
Your response, first of all, to that most recent line from NATO, they're going to significantly increase the number of forces on high alert. This will be the biggest overhaul of the alliance's defences since the Cold War. What do you make of that?
Yes, it's a return to a Cold War military posture, because what NATO has had over recent years is a deterrent posture where it kept forces on readiness, quite small numbers. I mean, 5,000 originally and then 40,000, that was a big step. But those forces were never going to be big enough to repel any invasion of NATO territory, but they would act as a tripwire so that they would actually activate the deterrent of rapid mobilization and rapid reinforcement of whatever territory had been violated. Moving to 300,000 plus is going back to the old 1960s model, which is to say we'll actually defend the territory. We'll have enough troops there ready to go so that it's, they used to call it a come as you are war. You win or lose according to what you've got on day one, to come as you are. And so if they mean it, and if 300,000 plus troops will be kept at high readiness, then NATO will be defending itself from day one, not relying on the deterrent of a tripwire strategy, and in the hope that they can then reinforce with convoys coming across the Atlantic with lots of American troops and so on.
Do we read into this then that NATO perhaps might be more concerned about some of the nations surrounding Ukraine that might be susceptible to Russia also? Do you think there's been any upstep in their concern, and this is a sign of that?
Yes, there has. I mean, the irony of all of it is that the Russians have made such a mess of their Ukrainian operation, and they're using most of about 60% of their standing army. The standing army in peacetime is only 280,000. It's not that big. And so they've used already 60% of it, and it's doing very badly. And so the irony is that NATO is less threatened by Russia in real military terms now than it's been for a very long time. But the anticipation is that this Ukrainian crisis is a step change in NATO's security environment, and that in fact, European security is now different. The world has changed since the 24th of February, and NATO has now got to be ready for one or two generations of tension with Russia, and that we've got to show to the Russians that we're not going to play about with sophisticated deterrence tripwire concepts. We're simply going to defend ourselves, and that they, the Russians or Putin, has got to get that message. I think that's what this is really all about.
President Zelensky is seeking more air defence, and there have been plans announced, or US government sources have briefed that Washington plans to announce very soon that it's bought a Norwegian advanced surface-to-air missile defence system for Ukraine. How much of a difference will that make?
They should do. This is very good. It's Kronenberg and Raytheon, I think, make it. Norwegian and American systems. They've been in use since the late 1990s, but they're very, very good because it's an air defense system which is networked, and it's just, they say, distributed. So every missile goes to a very specific target, even if it fires multiple missiles. And it's got a range of over 30 kilometers, and it's got a ceiling, a height of over 60,000 feet. So no aircraft, no modern aircraft can really get above it. And that means it is very, very capable. And to give this to the Ukrainians means that it will make the Russians even more nervous, which they already are, about flying combat missions over Ukraine. Ukraine's done pretty well so far in keeping the Russian Air Force, as it were, away from being able to make a real strategic difference. They do fly, they do attack ground targets and so on, but they've not had the big effect that you would have expected them to have. And this announcement, as and when they get there and as and when the Ukrainians use them, will actually keep Russian air defense or Russian air power even further at bay in practice.
Grain exports are also a huge concern and have been for some point, but we're now getting to the issue of entire silos at risk of drying up. It's something that the Prime Minister is expected to urge his G7 counterparts to act on. Russia are blockading ports such as Odessa at the moment. How would you propose getting the grain out? What are the options on this, Michael?
None of the options are very good. I mean, we always knew a couple of months ago, we said that this will be a crisis by July, which is true because there's just a natural cycle of agricultural production. So unless they clear the silos by July, and there's 25 million tons of grain backed up in Odessa, there's another 75 million tons will be arriving at some point in the next 2 or 3 months. So it's clearly a crisis, and it's a crisis for 400 million people in the poor world who depend on it. The options are not good. There's the idea of a negotiated option with Turkey acting as a mediator with Russia is not good at all, because the Russians will want a relief from sanctions in order to do anything with this, and I don't think they'll get that. And again, the sense that the Russians are holding the rest of the world as hostage, the food for the rest of the world as hostage. The only real answer is that NATO would have to take the risk. And with Turkey's agreement, because Turkey controls the Bosphorus, the strait into the Black Sea, the only thing that would work would be convoys, as it were, protected by Western powers, by Western warships in the Black Sea, to get the grain out in heavy ships, in heavy grain carriers, and dare the Russians, just dare them to try to stop us. I'm not recommending that option. I'm saying it's the only one that will make any sense. You simply can't shift these tonnages by land. You can put them on trains, you can put them on trucks, but basically trucks can only carry about 1/10. A day's worth of trucks carries about 1/10 of a day's cargo by sea. So you can only get a few million tons out by land, and there are all sorts of problems. Basically, if you don't get them out by sea soon, within the next month, then you don't get them to the people who need it by the time they need it.
So you're proposing a sea corridor there, where Western nations use their sea power, use their naval power to be able to escort the grain out of Ukraine via the Black Sea. How might Russia react? Because this would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this would perhaps be the most aggressive step so far by NATO, by the Western Alliance of Nations.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I stress, I'm not recommending this. I mean, that's a judgment that politicians have got to make. I'm saying it's the only one that would work. If we are prepared to do it, then it might work. But the danger is that we would have naval engagements in the Black Sea. Now, if those naval engagements took place, I'm absolutely convinced NATO would win them. I mean, NATO could sweep the Black Sea fleet away in an afternoon if it wanted to. But the point is that would be the beginning of an outright fighting arrangement. That would be a war, effectively, between NATO and the Russians, and the Russians will claim that they were attacked and all the rest of it. So it would be very, very dangerous. But the only way that this grain is going to get to the people who need it is by ship. And if the Russians won't do a deal, and I don't think they will, then it would have to be forced through by ship, and the Turks would have to agree to it because they control the Bosphorus into and out of the Black Sea. So the options are not good.